Who's actually going to get the most out of a medium-duty deli slicer? Who could walk away disappointed? And does the price make sense for a typical home-based hobbyist or a small-scale food stall? If you're on the fence, you're not alone. Buying a slicer is a bit like picking a knife. You need the right size for the job, the right blade for the material, and a price that matches how often you'll actually fire it up. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In the next few minutes, I'll walk through the real-world setup, the everyday usability, the hidden trade-offs, and the kind of buyer who will actually feel like they got a good deal versus the one who should probably keep scrolling. Let's start with the environment where this machine usually lives. The Omcan 23544 is marketed as a commercial medium-duty slicer, but the design language is more kitchen counter than factory floor. It sits on a sturdy anodized aluminum alloy base, which feels solid enough to handle the occasional bump when you're loading a large loaf of rye or a slab of pepperoni. The high-carbon steel blade is the heart of the unit, and it's driven by a belt system rather than a direct drive motor. In practice, the belt gives you smoother, quieter cuts compared to the harsher whine you hear from cheaper gear-driven models. If you've ever tried to slice a tomato on a cheap rotary slicer and ended up with mushy pulp, you'll notice the difference right away. The Omcan maintains a consistent thickness from start to finish, which is why many small-scale delis and catering outfits gravitate toward it. Now, who should actually consider this slicer? First off, anyone who does a regular volume of sliced products. Think home-based charcuterie hobbyists, weekend market vendors, or a family that makes its own sandwiches daily will appreciate the time saved. Imagine you're prepping a spread for a birthday brunch and you need 3 different cheeses, 2 types of cured meat, and a handful of vegetables all uniformly thin. Doing that by hand with a chef's knife can take 20 minutes or more, and the slices are rarely uniform. With this slicer, you can crank the thickness dial, feed the items through, and get a perfect stack in under 5 minutes. That efficiency translates directly into less prep fatigue and a more polished presentation. On the flip side, if you're a casual cook who slices a turkey breast once a month for a family sandwich, the investment might feel excessive. The machine weighs enough to be stable, but it's still a countertop appliance that needs a dedicated space and a nearby power outlet. You'll also need to allocate a few minutes each week for cleaning blade, belt, and the underside where crumbs collect. For occasional users, that maintenance routine can feel like more hassle than benefit, especially if you already have a decent handheld slicer or a mandolin that does the job well enough. One of the practical strengths of this Omcan model is the blade adjustment mechanism. It's a simple knob that clicks into place at each millimeter increment, so you can go from paper-thin deli slices to a hearty 10 millimeters cut without guessing. In a real-world test, I sliced a block of mozzarella at the 2 millimeter setting, and the slices held together without crumbling, something that's surprisingly hard to achieve with a cheap blade that tears rather than cuts. The belt-driven motor also means the unit runs cooler for longer periods, which is a real plus if you're slicing for a few hours straight at a farmer's market stand. Overheating is a common complaint with lower-priced slicers, and it can cause the blade to warp or lose sharpness. The Omcan's design seems to mitigate that, allowing for extended use without a noticeable drop in cut quality. However, there are a few trade-offs you should be aware of before you click Add to Cart. First, the machine is made in China, and while the anodized aluminum body feels durable, the plastic components, particularly the safety guard, can feel a bit flimsy after prolonged use. Some users have reported the guard loosening after a few months of heavy daily operation. That doesn't make the slicer unsafe per se, but it does mean you'll want to keep an eye on the tightness of the screws and perhaps keep a small screwdriver handy for quick adjustments. Second, the belt itself, while quieter than a gear drive, does wear out faster than a direct drive motor in high-intensity environments. The manufacturer offers a 1-year parts and labor warranty, which will cover a belt replacement if it fails within that window, but beyond that you'll be looking at a separate cost. If you plan to run the slicer multiple shifts per day, factor in that potential expense. Another practical point is the power draw. This slicer plugs into a standard 110-volt outlet and draws about 500 watts when running. That's modest compared to larger commercial units, but it still means you can't just plug it into a portable battery pack for an outdoor event without a proper inverter. For a weekend barbecue where you want to shave some